Man, have you guys ever noticed in today's world, we live in a society that just idolizes selfishness?
Mm.
If you just take a look at social media, it's filled with people screaming for attention, thirst traps, dancing. But the problem is these people still feel empty inside. Our society as a whole, especially when you think about post COVID, really does feel empty inside. Now I want you to think about a time that you're at a birthday party, you're at a wedding, you're at some sort of event that celebrates somebody. Have you ever noticed how when you put their needs above yours, when you're able to clap for them, or maybe when you're able to even serve somebody, it just changes that dynamic of how you feel. 99 times out of 100, you feel great. You're super happy for them. You don't feel less than them. You just support the importance of the moment that you're in with that person that matters to you at that moment. Now, I want you to ask yourself a real question. When was the last time you were humble or truly supportive to your spouse without expecting anything in return? Or maybe reverse that. When was the last time they were humble and supportive towards you? This can be a really eye opening question that you ask yourself in your relationship. And today we're going to jump just feet first into the topic of humility. And if you really go through the things, we're going to go through 7 points today, and you go through those 7 points with your spouse, you will come out the other side adding rocket fuel to your marriage. I am absolutely positive. And by the way, Steph and I aren't perfect at this either. We can
Mhm.
struggle with humility also. But welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages Podcast, episode 57. As you guys know, I'm your host, Walt McKinley, and I'm here with my beautiful wife and my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
We love that you're here, so we always give you a reminder. Make sure you hit that bell. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And look, guys, we can't grow without you either. So make sure that you're sharing this out, especially people that you know that could use it, but even just helping us reach the people that maybe don't. And go to legacydrivenmarriages.com and sign up for that weekly newsletter too. So I can't wait to dig into this one. We're facilitating a marriage class right now at our church. And the topic we're going to go through tonight with our group is humility. And man, I don't know about you, Steph, but I know for me, sometimes humility is tough.
Yeah, we feel like this is a tough topic in your relationship, especially. It's hard in general, but it sometimes becomes really tough in a relationship, but it's really crucial. It's something that I think we found when we hit a low point that this was missing from our relationship because we weren't willing to humble ourselves to see the other person's point of view. And this is what's often missing. I feel like for a lot of couples, this is the one big thing we really struggle with is we we just tend to have this, need for like to be right, or that we have this pride and we can't admit that we're wrong because s- somewhat it's just pride, some of it's selfishness, some of it's there's a lot of factors that play into why we struggle with this, but it's really hard, and we live in a culture where a lot of people do not show humility. And so I think it's really this is going to be pretty eye-opening, I think, for a lot of you, in just that if you go through when we as we talk about these things and you really think about your own relationship and you really ask yourself if you do these things for your spouse, or does your spouse do them for you and you don't, so you need to like really get real with yourself in this and really ask yourself, do I do these things, and could I be better? How could I be better?
Mm-hmm.
Because let me tell you, we definitely, I mean, Walt and I still struggle with a lot of these,
Mm-hmm.
and we catch ourselves, like,
Yeah.
man, I could be doing better at that. Or, you know, I really love that my spouse just did that. That just showed me, like, man, that really meant a lot. And I should probably do that too. Or,
And,
you
and
know,
and here's the thing, guys. Humility is risky, man,
mm,
because it's hard sometimes to even humble yourself when you've got, like Steph said, pride, you got ego, you got hurt, you've got resentments, you've got pain,
mhm.
maybe there's shame and guilt, maybe it's just a trigger for you with the way that your spouse talked to you in a moment. take a step back, especially when you feel hurt or when you feel attacked or where you feel like somebody's really trying to press that button and your spouse is really getting to you. To take a step back and respond with humility really takes risk, because sometimes as we go through these 7 things in this podcast, sometimes you're not going to get these things reciprocated. They're not even going to acknowledge that you're doing some of these things, or you might not be acknowledging that they are. And that's why that humility is truly risky. But the more humble we're able to make ourselves, the more we draw closer to our spouse. They truly do go hand in hand, but you got to put the pride, ego, resentment, pains, guilt, shame, and all those other negative emotions to the side and really see the bigger picture. The hardest thing to do in marriage is when you're struggling is see the forest through the trees. It's just way easier to stay focused on the moment and what's happening right in front of you. And when we're talking about humility, it takes a whole nother level of patience and grace and loving and seeing the big picture to take a step back and be humble and serve your spouse in a way that moves your relationship forward when maybe you don't even like them.
Well, I'm just going to add to when you said it's risky. I know for me, there's a lot. It's not even always necessarily what happened in our relationship. Sometimes it's something from another relationship. Like this could even be for me. It's been a lot of friendships where I feel like I put myself out there and I was humble, and they took advantage of that and I got treated like a doormat, or um, they used it against me. Like at some point later down the road when they were hurt or upset about something, then they turned it around and used it against me. And that has made me, that makes you start building up those walls, and that starts making you be like, well, I'm not going to do that again because I'm not going to let myself get hurt. It's a protection mechanism. And so we increasingly get to where we show less and less humility because of people who've hurt us in the past. And a lot of times it's hard for us to open ourselves up again and take that risk when we know what that feels like. And so I know this is something that I struggle with because I think for me, my natural tendency, I was raised to be very humble. My mom is a big Christ follower, and she was very big on teaching me to be humble. And so I think in a lot of ways it comes naturally to me, but then I've had a lot of people turn it on me. And so I've been hurt a lot by it. And so it's become a lot harder for me to show the same humility sometimes because I feel like it's been used against me too many times and I've been hurt too many times that now, I put up that wall. And I see this with a lot of people. And this is why I think it's so important to talk about this, because it's really hard to have a relationship where you're going to find compromise when you can't humble yourself sometimes to not win the fight, or, you know, be the one that's, winning and right all the time. And it takes a lot of humility to let things go that maybe really upset you, and you feel like that person just can't see it. They can't hear you, and it gets really frustrating and upsetting, and that's where those resentments build too. So we have to get back to seeing like where it should be, though. Like we're going to talk about some of these examples of this is how in your relationship you can show that humility.
And I want you guys to ask yourself this question and be truly honest with yourself. Are you expecting that your spouse or your partner is never going to hurt your feelings? If you're expecting that, you're just going to be disappointed
Yeah.
throughout your entire relationship. It's not realistic. You spend the most time in your life with your spouse. So you guys are going to hurt each other. You guys are going to disappoint each other. But when you can give grace and forgiveness for that, and you can respond and take actions that are humble, you really will grow your marriage and make your marriage stronger than it's ever been. The
Mhm.
challenge is realizing, even though you've been hurt in the past and maybe they were the ones that hurt you, it doesn't mean that you don't give them an opportunity to change. The closest you're going to feel with somebody is truly in that humble servant mode that feels great when you're in it, if we get what we want reciprocated back to us. True humility is being selfless without expecting anything in return. As humans, we're really programmed to be selfish, even in our humility, because we want something back in return. So if you can just get rid of that expectation that you receive anything back from them, then your relationship will grow and it will blossom and you will see fruits of that effort. But in practical, application, this is not easy, guys. We get it. Steph and I were arguing. We were getting all petty with each other yesterday. We just don't stay in the argument. And by the way, I was doing my daughter's taxes and there was some issue with the IRS with them. And so we finally got them done, but I was feeling very agitated. And we had been running late to try to go get our walk in. And I was feeling just overall just frustrated for the day. And I kind of snapped at Steph, asking her to go find last year's taxes unnecessarily, right? I was just triggered in the moment. I was frustrated. I was wrong. I had to go back later. Stephanie responded. She was savage right back with me. I just didn't say anything in the moment. So the humility for me in that next moment was not responding back because I wanted to. I just knew that the conversation wasn't going to be healthy if we just kept going back and forth. This is where we catch ourselves in that cycle faster. It's not that we don't get in it. We just catch ourselves. But then I had to take accountability for my actions. And then I had to go back and apologize, not with but I was doing this, not with any excuse, just, hey, I'm sorry. My tone really sucked earlier. Love you. And then she said, okay. And then 10 minutes later, she came in, she apologized for her tone. And then bam, you lock arms and you keep moving forward down the path of marriage together. That takes a lot of humility in the moment. Even though I was still frustrated just with the whole overall day at that point, I still needed to humble myself. And I went and apologized to my daughter too. That's what's really important. So ask yourself, when is it hardest for you to show humility to your spouse? When do you really struggle to show that level of humility that puts the marriage and your spouse first? When you can start to answer those kind of questions, you become aware and you can move forward. And then ask yourself, what has kept you from being more humble to your spouse? What resentments or pain or hurts or whatever, grievances, what past things are you hanging on to that keep you from being humble with your spouse? And I want you to really ask yourself those two questions. I want you to write down your answers. And then we're going to go through the 7 ways, different kind of ways you can show humility in your marriage, because without practical application, it means nothing, right? It's all theory. So what can you actually do? That's what this podcast is about, is executable things you can do right now, creating an action plan to create some humility that can improve your marriage.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about these. We have 7 ways humility can help improve your marriage. And so the first one is not needing to be right. So I touched on this already, but
it's really hard when you're right all the time, though. Not feel that way. Got
him. So really, if you're being humble, you're trying to see your spouse's perspective. So we've talked about this a few different times, where this need to win the fight. So for instance, when Walt was saying he was having a bad day, he kind of took that out on me and my daughter. And he, normally with Walt's personality, he would have, he snapped at me, and I had already been quiet for a while because I heard the way he was talking to my daughter before that, and I didn't say anything because I was trying to let him I was hoping maybe he would just work it out on his own. Well, then he snapped at me. So then I snapped at him because I felt like he needed a reality check in that moment. Like, hey, this isn't okay. Now I could have approached it a little differently. I could have been a little nicer in the way that I said it, but I just felt like in that moment that wasn't where it was going.
Well, you reacted too, right? Let's be real. We're all humans.
But then normally he would have just kept arguing with me or snapped back with something else. He didn't in that moment, but normally he would have, because why? He would have wanted to win the fight. He would have wanted to be right. He just wanted to be right, right?
Well, sometimes you just want to argue for no reason.
Yeah, or it's like you're just in that mood, so it's like, I just need everybody else to be angry with me. Like, that's kind of how you feel in that moment, is like, I'm just mad and I want everyone else to be mad too. So this is that one of those things that sometimes it's not you just don't need to be right. Even if you know you are. you don't you don't have to be right. Like, a lot of times, honestly, like, the way he responded in return that this time is a way better thing to do, because it led to a better conclusion. Like, we didn't continue to escalate and fight
Mhm.
and not go anywhere with it, you know.
Or carry it through the whole day.
Right. You end it faster and we're able to move on. Like, and he apologized and we moved on. And then we didn't continue to have a bad day because he stayed in that place. Sometimes it's just better to let it go and realize that it's not that serious, unless it is. I mean, there are some instances where it's not okay to, like, you really do need to have a conversation about it. But sometimes it's like, you can just tell someone's having a bad day. If you can tell that, like I could tell he was, there's no reason to continue on with it. Like,
Well, it's like 80% of the time is where this applies, right? 90% of the time there's outlier, right? Abuse and verbal abuse and narcissism and physical abuse and those things where just you got to get out. You can't stay and be selfless and have humility with somebody who doesn't even see that their actions carry weight behind them. And so if you're in that situation, like, that's a different conversation than what we're talking about in this part of it. And by the way, who's right anyway? In an argument, you and your spouse are going back and forth. You feel like you're right because it's your perspective. They're going to have a different perspective than you, which is why they might dig in their heels and feel like they're right. And nobody goes anywhere. So really, not needing to be right, putting the team first, focusing on for us, Team McKinley win, is so important, because at the end of the day, there really is no right. Even the way that you do a math problem, the answer might be right at the end, but the way you approach getting the answer is different. It's no different in arguments or disagreements in marriage. You still got to reach a compromised agreement at the end, even if you don't quite agree on everything. What's the team win and how do you get there?
Yeah, what we were trying to get you guys to realize is just every time start thinking, how do I be solution focused on this? How can I bring a solution to this and not the problem, and not keep blaming? So anyway, this is what we were saying. You don't need to be right. If you're having humility, you don't feel the need to be right. You just want to come to an agreeable solution.
And the next thing, number 2, is asking for forgiveness. And look, guys, I got to be real. Like I said, when we got in that argument yesterday and I was just feeling frustrated in general, I didn't necessarily want to go apologize in the moment. I sat there for a little bit and I thought, I just needed to go get the taxes, not say she didn't do them last year, not say all these other things. I just asked for something quick. And I'm like justifying my actions in my head, why I was justified to be snotty in the moment and have my tone suck in the moment. What I needed to do is realize, and what I came to realize was, hey, how I spoke to them was still harmful. It was still unnecessary. I didn't need to go there with my tone. I could have just taken a breath, realized that I was frustrated, either went and got the taxes from last year myself, or just said, hey, this is why I'm looking for this. And here's what I need your help with right now. Can you go do that while I work on this other part of our taxes? When you realize the damage you've done, when you can really truly admit to the wrongs that you've done, you can go apologize and you will be forgiven. Maybe not immediately, especially if it's repetitive things that you're doing over and over and over again all the time. But Stephanie and I were both able to just take a step back, realize our contribution to that negative conversation that we had, apologize to each other, accept the apologies from each other, and we had a great rest of our day. We just had to get through that little 40-minute rough patch that married couples go through where they're just being petty on some dumb shit. Like, that's what it was. We recognize it and we laugh about it now. It wasn't funny yesterday for those 45 minutes, but it was funny today talking about it because it just made us stronger. Makes us better because we learned how to respond again and get out of that damn crazy cycle we all get in.
Yeah. So number 3 is communicating kindly.
It's weird how these all go together.
this is kind of plays in with number one, but when you communicate kindly, you don't need to try to even the score. And again, this comes back to like, if your goal is just to reach a solution, then you're not going to have to fire back or, you know, do all these other things that aren't. Actually, I'm going to change where I'm going to go with this, because I think the biggest thing, communicating kindly, is important because it is all how you approach someone. There's a real difference between approaching someone kindly and coming to them with an attitude or a tone that clearly says you're irritated or agitated. They're going to receive whatever you're saying so differently when you come to them kindly. Like how we talked about with the speaker listener technique, and how we say, instead of coming to them and saying, you're always making us late, or you're always spending all the money, or you come to them saying that, they're immediately on the defense. Where if you came to them and said, hey, I'm kind of feeling like, you know when we run late, it just makes me feel chaotic, and I would really like if we could, what do we need to do that we can be on time, and then maybe suggest something. It's so different for someone to approach you that way than to come at you with an attitude and blaming you. Because immediately you're just like, whoa. Like, it's not a good feeling. So it's really important. And like I said, so even for that example Walt was using, where he came at me with the attitude, if I had just responded calmly, went and did what I knew would help, and gave it to him, it would it would have diffused him, instead of. Now, luckily in this situation, he didn't let it escalate, but normally it would have. And most of the time, in most situations, it would escalate if you don't try to diffuse the situation. So when you speak kindly, that naturally diffuses things.
And by the way, I'll add one thing to that. Don't you feel better when you've spoken kindly? You feel better
Yeah.
about the interaction too.
You
And it
actually
just
leave it
puts
feeling
you in a
better.
better mood also. There is no downside to speaking kindly. Zero. Just remember that next time you don't want to
Well,
speak
not for
kindly.
some people, because some people really feel like, no, they've got to prove their point or be right, or
And then later,
they
they're
think they
upset
don't.
because a relationship with the person they needed to prove their point to is hurting, and they realize that person set some boundaries, so they don't have a great it's negative. It's like this downhill slide that you get on when you're speaking negative to each other. So communicate kindly, like Stephanie said. Thank God she's way better at that than me, let me tell you guys. The next thing is study your spouse. It's crazy to me in courtship how we know everything about our partner up to that point. We know what they like. We know what they don't like. We know what they like to do for fun. We know their favorite restaurant. We know their favorite kind of foods. We know their favorite movie. We know all of this stuff about them. And then you get married and life hits you. And you know that stuff. But you don't even realize where some of those things have maybe changed as they've matured and their interests have gotten different. You got to take time to study your spouse. If you're going to be able to be truly selfless, and you're going to be able to have some humility and serve your spouse in a way that moves your relationship forward. If you can study your spouse and you know what they like and what they don't like, and what they want, what they dream of, and you've got some shared vision and goals together, man, you can have this beautiful relationship the way that God intended our relationships to be, versus the beat down we take in life that we bring into our relationships that creates this negative environment that feels really hard to get out of, maybe sometimes impossible to get out of.
Yeah, I think we all know what we like, and it's very easy for us to throw our 2 cents in and say, "Well, I'd like to eat here because that's what I like." But sometimes you need to share that with, like, say, ask your spouse where they'd like to eat. Ask them first and let them have the choice. So take turns with that. Like, do these things that, like, study your spouse in the way that, like, you can tell what kind of things that they like and what would boost them. Or, for Walt, like, he really likes getting his hair tickled or his back tickled. So a lot of times if we sit down and watch a show, I will do that for him because I know he really likes it. So there's just certain things that it's like, if your spouse really loves coffee in the morning and that's really like that's their love language, that
Hmm.
really starts their day, make the coffee for them and surprise them with the cup of coffee. Like those little things go so far. And it's just, it shows that you pay attention and you care about your spouse. That's what
Mm.
they take away when you do those little, if you study your spouse and you learn the things that they like and you do those things, they know you care and that you pay attention. It matters.
And when it's consistent over an extended period of time, they do start reciprocating that.
Mhm.
It will come back to you. We just get afraid because the time we got hurt, that if we do that for somebody else, it's going to be just like the last time that we got hurt. That's not
It's like I
necessarily
can't even
true.
tell you guys. There's been like a couple times where Walt just had went to the store for something, but he came back with my favorite candy bar. And I love Twix, and he came back with Twix, and it's like, oh, he thought of me. Like those little things, like they matter. It does. It's like, oh, it just shows you that they thought about you, and that so you matter to them.
And don't stop talking about it. If you like something, communicate that, like Stephanie said. It's your
Mhm.
responsibility to communicate that. But then also ask your spouse what they like too. Because I'll tell you, I love playing basketball. I physically can't play basketball anymore. So I don't play basketball. So even though I love to do that, and Steph, she'd go watch me play back in the day, or
Mhm.
if I went and played for a couple hours, she'd be like, cool, I know that's your thing. You love to do it. I can't do that anymore. So she had to figure out, what else do I like? Because she couldn't support the way that I like to play basketball before. Things do change for a multitude of reasons.
Mhm.
That's why you never stop talking and you never stop studying your spouse, because you will need to make adjustments over the course of your marriage if you're going to really get it to the next level. And I want to take the next one because I love
Mhm.
this one. Celebrating your spouse's success, right? This is number 5. It's so surprising to me how many people are in competition with their spouse. You should never be in competition with your spouse. You should really be the biggest cheerleader your
Mm.
spouse has ever had. When you can live in a home where you can cheer for your spouse and your kids, and it's not just about your personal success, but it's about celebrating their wins and their success and supporting their journey when they're on those hard things that they're trying to get through. Man, like you just build this joy in the house that you'll deny yourself from if you don't do that. Steph's always been
Mhm.
just an incredible supporter for me. Always clap for me. Always been like my biggest cheerleader. And as she's gotten in this season where we've done the podcast and we delivered our marriage reset workshop in corporate for the first time a couple weeks ago, and she's crushing it. I get to cheerlead for her. When she got her degree, I got to cheer for her. And I was getting all teary eyed, cheering for my wife, seeing her accomplish something that she had set her goal and her sights for. It's so much fun to be celebrated. Yes, I know. I like the attention. I love to be celebrated. Please give me some more. But let me tell you what, it just hits a lot different when you could be the biggest cheerleader for your spouse. Just feels different. There's a different kind of spirit that moves you in those moments when you can really be your spouse's biggest cheerleader.
Yeah, I just want to share, you guys. I don't know if we shared this on here last episode, but we recently had to do a talk um for a corporation, and it was a marriage reset workshop, but it was going to be the first talk that we did together where it was like we're giving this talk. And I I was so nervous and fearful, and because I just felt a lot of pressure too, and I already am like, you guys know I've shared a lot on here about I'm not an extrovert. That doesn't come natural for me. It's very hard. Like I was getting teary eyed just even talking about, because I was just, it was so nice too, because Walt really was being a huge cheerleader for me on that. And I'm telling you, the day before I was really like,
She
I don't
was
know,
feeling them cold
starting to
feet.
kind of feel like, I don't know if I could do this. And I was like getting upset and crying. And he was just like, just talking me through it. And he always does that. Like he'll talk me down from it and, just try to make me realize like, you're capable. I believe in you. You can do this. Like, I know you're going to. And afterwards, he publicly put a post out about, he just felt like I really did a really good job. And that is huge. Like, it feels so good to be celebrated by your spouse, that person you love the most, and when they tell you they're just proud of you and they are cheering you on. Like nothing, it feels so awesome. And like he said, and it feels even better. I've had the opportunity to cheer Walt on many things too. Like he's had some really big accomplishments, and it's just, it's so awesome. Like you just feel so proud, and it's a really good feeling too. And like he said, so don't be in competition with each other. You should really always be your spouse's biggest cheerleader. And it really, and we have this under humility, but I mean, it, I guess you do have to humble yourself, but I don't know, some of us are just kind of we naturally care and want people to succeed, so it feels good to see your spouse succeed like that.
Well, some people struggle to not have the spotlight on them. I'm a spotlight guy. I love the
Mm,
spotlight. I don't get nervous.
right.
Like, well, even if I get nervous, you would never know because I'm fired up too. And if the nerves might seem like I'm fired up, I'm like, let's go. We're doing this. Yeah. I love the spotlight. And for Stephanie, she's loves being a supporter. She doesn't necessarily love the
Yeah,
spotlight,
I like the background.
but it was really cool to be able to support her in that way as she overcomes one of her biggest fears. And that's the thing, is that drives a different kind of connection. And when you can really look at your spouse, your marriage and your relationship with your spouse, and you can sit back and you can say, man, we really do support each other's accomplishments. We support the struggle of going through them and the growth that happens with it, but then we're celebrating the victory. Because I got to tell you, if Steph's winning, I'm winning.
But
If
I
I'm
have to
winning, she's
say,
winning.
right, but if I didn't cheer on your successes, then you wouldn't have been as likely to cheer on mine. And I think this is going to be a lot harder for people who like to be the center of attention. Someone who really likes the center of attention, or feels like they lacked that a lot of their life, they're going to have a harder time with this because they didn't have someone cheering them on. So then it's harder for them to want to cheer someone else on. So that's where I feel like this one, I know there's people out there that I'm sure struggle with this one.
But
And
that's
not because they're a bad person, just because it's not in their personality to
But
do it.
that's why it takes two to tango. That's why we tell you guys, listen to the podcast with your spouse, even if you go back and listen to the same episode with your spouse, because this is about getting you guys as a couple on the same page. And when you can really get on the same page and you realize maybe it's something Stephanie said, maybe it's something I said, maybe it's something, a joke that we made. Who knows what's going to hit you or your spouse, because everybody's different. But when you guys can get on the same page and you're really moving forward together, it's exponential. There's some Clydesdale horses, and I don't know if I have my math numbers correct, but when two people work together, you can pull so much more. There's Clydesdale horses. On their own, they can pull like 7,000 pounds. It's pretty impressive. But when you put them together, they can pull 20,000. 20 exponentially more than they could ever do on their own. That's what being in a healthy marriage looks like, where you're having humility and you're really supporting each other in this way.
So number 6 is serving your spouse. So how can you lighten their load and help out more? So this is a big one in relationships, especially in today's world where both people work, and you're both trying to take on the household chores and take care of the kids and work, and you got to like find this way to, so if you see your spouse is, they have like, let's say they got to pick up the kids that day and maybe you offer to do it, say we'll split this like so many days a week. I can do it these days, you do it those days, or you just see that, they've got a lot on their plate that day. So it's like you ask your spouse, how can I serve you this week? Or how can I serve you today? Like, how can I help you take some things off your plate so you're not feeling so stressed? This is huge, you guys, because we all have our moments of, where we just are at a breaking point, and and if someone just steps in, and your spouse says, hey, how can I help you out? Man, that's huge.
And the thing is, don't wait till your spouse asks. It's
Mm-hmm.
never going to be 50-50 at the same time. And if you're looking for that, you're just going to be left being disappointed in a lot of your relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is our emotional capacity for the day, the stress we're feeling at work, a project that we have coming up, kids in sports. There's all these things that housework that spouses are doing back and forth that need to get done, period. So if you know your spouse is under a lot of stress, jump in without being asked and help. If you don't know where to jump in, then yes, ask them, where can you use my help with the most? I want to pull some of the stuff off of your plate. So it isn't a one for one trade off. It's just continuing to put the team up front and continuing to make sure that the team is winning, and then showing up for each other when one person maybe has a little bit more strength than the other.
This is where you really got to pay attention and recognize and like see if you see your spouse is struggling and you see they're like breaking down in tears, or they're, like that's where you step in and say, like, how can I help you? If you can just see it, just do it.
Yeah. And how can you step in before your spouse breaks down in tears?
Right.
Right? How do you see that coming and know that the storm's coming towards you, and know that they're getting in this dark place, and pull them back out of that before they ever get to it, or before they get too deep that it's extra hard to pull them out of. And number 7, finally, is put your spouse's needs first. Bro, this one's hard sometimes. I'm a selfish human being by nature. I'm selfish based upon my life experiences. I'm selfish based upon my relationship experiences. I'm also human, and we're just innately selfish. But when you can put your spouse's need first, when you could really be selfless, and you can put their needs before yours, you do create some unity that you will deny yourself of the rest of your marriage if you can't do this sometimes. Now, don't hear me say you always put your spouse's needs before yours. That's not realistic, and some people will take advantage of that. But when you take a selfless mindset, it doesn't mean you don't feel like you're just important. It just means I love my spouse enough to put their needs in front of mine, because they need me to do more of the pulling for our relationship right now. And when both of you guys can do that for each other, that's when the magic really happens. It's not just in the bedroom.
Yeah. So to wrap up, we want to ask you guys. So, this week, ask your spouse, 1 or 2 things you could do to serve them more. And what would they really want from you? Really ask them that. Like, you initiate that. You say, how can I help out more this week? And see what happens.
I love that Stephanie says, treat others how you want to be treated. The golden rule sometimes is the biggest rule that we don't adopt in our marriage, because there's so many other factors that go into that. But are you willing to be humble? Are you willing to serve your spouse? Or are you just expecting them to do it for you? It's time to take a step back. It's time to see the forest through the trees. It's time to stop living small in your relationship, and it's time to start maximizing what your marriage can be. And that starts with you really taking a selfless mindset.
Yeah, I love that you said, that's something I want you to ask yourself too, is, are you expecting something from your spouse that you're not even doing? Like, are you even doing what you're expecting from them? Because if you're not doing what you're expecting, then why do you have that expectation? You really got to take a step back and ask that, because that's actually a pretty deep, profound question that we often don't look at. So we have these expectations, and we're getting resentful about it. But most of the time, we're not even doing what we're expecting them to do. So, that's kind of like the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So look, guys, you know what we're about. We have the raw, real conversations that most people aren't willing to talk about. This isn't just about fluff. This is about building a legacy-driven marriage. That's why you show up, and we appreciate you for continuing to do that. One thing you can also do to continue to push the envelope in your relationship and continue to press on the gas so that it doesn't slow down is commit to building your marriage by signing up for our weekly newsletter at thelegacydrivenmarriages.com. Sorry, I don't know why I said it's just legacydrivenmarriages.com. Sign up for the weekly newsletter. It's free, just like this podcast. It's our way to give back and give tactical, candid, real advice that you can take action on and execute to transform your relationship and your marriage and really become the power couple that both of you guys deserve to be. So look, guys, thank you again for showing up. We appreciate y'all so much. And until the next time.
I challenge you to be more humble this week. And
hold on. Wait. Steph messed up the flow right there. Hold on. And until the next time.
Get into the arena of your marriage. keep fighting for your relationship and keep elevating your generational legacy. And we'll see you guys next Tuesday.
Let's go.